One morning, I was having breakfast with my loving husband. By evening, I was in a jail cell, framed for insanity, and the man who put me there was still smiling. The first thing that hits you isn't the cold of the concrete bench or the rough, scratchy texture of the state-issue blanket. It's the smell. It's a mix of stale sweat, disinfectant, and a deep, underlying despair that seems to have seeped into the very walls. I'd been in the cell for 6 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. The heavy metal door had clanged shut, sealing me in a world I'd only ever seen in movies. And the man who put me here? The man who had smiled and waved at the officers as they cuffed me? My husband, Mark. Just this morning, we were having breakfast. He'd passed me the marmalade, his eyes crinkling in that way that used to make my heart flutter. "Big day today, darling," he'd said, referring to the final signing of the papers that would make him a co-owner of my family's lucrative import-export business, a legacy my father had built from nothing. I was so proud to finally be bringing him in, to make us a true power couple. I was so stupid. The argument started over something ridiculous, a misplaced set of keys, but his tone was different. It was sharp, accusatory. "You're always so forgetful, Clara. It's getting worse," he'd said, his voice laced with a strange, feigned concern. I'd brushed it off, but he pushed. He brought up other things, a missed dinner reservation last month, a bill I'd forgotten to pay. He twisted every minor mistake into a symptom of some deep-seated instability. He was gaslighting me, but in that moment, I was just confused and hurt. It escalated until I was yelling, my voice raw with frustration. "I'm not crazy, Mark." That's when the doorbell rang. 2 police officers stood on our pristine porch. Mark opened the door, his face a mask of weary sadness. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he'd said to them, his voice low and confidential. "She's having another episode. I'm just so worried she's going to hurt herself." He showed them a small scratch on his arm, a scratch I'd never seen before, and a framed photo on the mantelpiece that was now shattered on the floor. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't laid a hand on him, but my fingerprints would be all over the frame from when I dusted it yesterday. It was a perfect, diabolical trap. They didn't listen to my frantic denials. To them, I was just another hysterical woman. Mark had a file ready for them, a folder full of notes from a therapist I'd never met, detailing my supposed erratic behavior and violent outbursts. Forged, all of it. He had been planning this for months, maybe years. As they led me away, he mouthed the words, "It's for the best." He looked like a hero, a long-suffering husband finally getting his unstable wife the help she needed. In reality, he was a monster, calmly executing a coup. With me declared mentally unstable and incarcerated, he would have power of attorney. He'd have everything. My one phone call was a joke. The number they gave me for a public defender went to a full voicemail box. I was alone, trapped, and legally erased. Mark had won. I curled up on the bench, pulling the wretched blanket over my head, and finally let the tears come. Hot, silent tears of rage and utter helplessness. I had no one. My father passed away 2 years ago, and my mother lived in a different country, her health too frail for a shock like this. I was completely, utterly alone. Hours later, the slot in the door squeaked open. A tray with a styrofoam cup of water and a sandwich wrapped in plastic was pushed through. I ignored it. A few minutes later, I heard the jingle of keys, and the heavy door groaned open. An older guard stood there, his face etched with the kind of permanent weariness that comes from decades of seeing people at their worst. He was heavy-set, with a thick gray mustache and tired eyes. "You need to eat," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm not hungry," I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. He sighed, stepping just inside the cell. He wasn't looking at me, but at the booking sheet clipped to the door. "Clara, Miller, he read, then paused. He looked back at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. That's your married name. What was it before? The question was so unexpected it caught me off guard. What? Your maiden name, miss. What was it? Why does that matter? I asked, my voice sharp with suspicion. He took another step closer, lowering his voice. Just answer the question. A flicker of defiance ran through me. It's Peterson, I said, lifting my chin. Clara Peterson. His entire demeanor changed. The weariness in his eyes was replaced by a flash of recognition, then something else. Respect. He looked from me to the door and back again, as if seeing me for the first time. Peterson, he repeated, almost to himself. As in, Commissioner Frank Peterson? My breath hitched. He was my father. The guard stared at me for a long, silent moment. A dozen emotions flickered across his face. He finally took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He leaned in, his voice barely a whisper, a conspiratorial and dangerous sound in the echoing silence of the cell block. Your father saved my job 20 years ago, kept my family from going hungry when I messed up bad. He was the most honorable man I ever knew. He straightened up, his eyes now hard as steel. I know who you are, Clara, and I know a setup when I see one. He gave me a look so intense it sent a shiver down my spine. You just get some sleep. Tomorrow your husband loses everything. I slept, but it was a fitful, shallow sleep, punctuated by the clang of distant doors and the shouts of other inmates. When I awoke, it was to the same smell, the same oppressive grayness. For a heart-stopping second, I thought the guard's words had been a dream, a desperate fantasy cooked up by my shattered mind. But then the cell door opened again. It was him, the older guard. He had a different tray this time, with a cup of what smelled like real coffee and a warm pastry. "Morning, Clara," he said, his voice low and calm. "Name's O'Connell. My friends call me Sarge." He placed the tray on the small metal table. "We don't have a lot of time. Your husband is a fast worker." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "That file he gave my sergeant last night, the one full of a psychiatrist's lies, it got misplaced, dropped into the confidential shredding bin by mistake. A real shame." A slow, deliberate wink. He had just destroyed Mark's primary evidence against me. It was a colossal risk, his career on the line for a dead man's daughter. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever—" "You can thank me by getting out of here and taking back what's yours," he cut in, his tone all business. "This buys you a few hours, maybe until midday. Mark will have copies, but by the time he gets them to the DA, we need to have our own cannon pointed at his ship. You get one call. It can't be traced, and it can't be to anyone your husband expects. Forget your friends. Forget any lawyers you shared. He'll have them watched." He slid the folded paper across the table. On it was a single name and a phone number, Arthur Vance. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Who is he?" I asked. "He was your father's lawyer, not for the business, for his private affairs, the messy stuff. Your dad called him the cleaner. He's ruthless, he's loyal, and he owes your father more than he could ever repay. Tell him Frank's Kingfisher is in a cage. He'll know what it means." Frank's Kingfisher. It was my father's pet name for me when I was a little girl, because of my bright blue eyes and my habit of flitting around everywhere. It was a secret just between the two of us. 10 minutes later, I was in a small, windowless office that smelled of burnt coffee and paperwork. Sarge stood guard outside the door. I dialed the number, my fingers shaking so badly I had to try twice. It rang once before a clipped, impatient voice answered. "Vance! Mr. Vance," I began, my own voice a reedy tremor. "My name is Clara Miller. My father was—" My father was Frank Peterson. There was a pause. I could hear the rustle of papers. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Miller, but I haven't practiced family law in 30 years. I'm not sure how I can help you. He was dismissing me. My heart sank. Wait, I pleaded, my voice cracking. Please. My father told me. He said to tell you that Frank's kingfisher is in a cage. The line went completely silent. I could hear his breathing, a sharp intake of air. The rustling of papers stopped. The impatient, dismissive man was gone, replaced by someone else entirely. The voice that came back was cold, focused, and lethal. Where are you, Clara? Don't tell me anything else. Just the location. The downtown precinct, I said. Holding cell C block. Stay there. Say nothing to anyone. Don't sign anything. Don't eat anything they bring you unless O'Connell gives it to you himself. I'm on my way. The line went dead. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. Sarge put me back in my cell, giving me a nod that was meant to be reassuring. The cavalry is coming, he muttered before locking the door. But with every passing minute, the tendrils of doubt choked the hope in my chest. What if he couldn't do anything? Mark had money, influence, and a carefully constructed narrative. I was just a prisoner in a paper jumpsuit. Around noon, 2 new guards appeared at my cell door. They weren't from the precinct. They were bigger, colder, and wore uniforms from the county psychiatric services. One of them held up a clipboard. Clara Miller, we have a court order for your transfer to the St. Jude's assessment facility. Let's go. My blood ran cold. St. Jude's. It was a place you went in and never came out of. Mark had done it. He had bypassed the system and gotten an emergency committal order. O'Connell was nowhere in sight. The plan had failed. Arthur Vance was too late. Numb with terror, I allowed them to escort me down the hallway, through a series of secure doors, and into a concrete sally port where a white transport van waited, its back doors open like a hungry mouth. This was it. This was how I disappeared. One of the guards grabbed my arm, ready to shove me inside. Suddenly, a squeal of tires echoed through the garage. A sleek black town car shot down the ramp and swerved, expertly blocking the van's exit. The engine cut, plunging the bay into an unnerving silence, broken only by the van's low rumble. The driver's side door opened, and a man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit emerged. He was older, with silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. He wasn't looking at the guards. His piercing gray eyes were locked on me. He took a single step forward, and his voice, the same lethal, focused voice from the phone, cut through the air like a razor. "Take your hands off my client." The 2 psychiatric orderlies froze, their hands still on me. They exchanged a look of pure confusion. "Who the hell are you?" the bigger one grunted, his bravado barely masking his unease. Arthur Vance didn't even glance at him. He simply held up his phone, the screen glowing in the dim light of the sally port. "I'm the man who just sent a copy of this court-ordered injunction to your supervisor, the county judge, and the head of the medical board. It cites malfeasance, improper procedure, and conspiracy to commit unlawful imprisonment. The man who signed that committal order, Judge Albright, he's an old golfing buddy of your employer, Mr. Miller. He's also about to be the subject of a judicial review that will end his career. Now, as I said," Vance's voice dropped, becoming dangerously soft, "take your hands off my client, or the next people you speak to will be from internal affairs." They dropped their hands from my arms as if I were red hot. Without another word, they scurried back into their van, which hastily reversed and sped out of the garage. Arthur Vance walked over to me, his granite face softening almost imperceptibly. "Clara, it's good to finally meet you. Your father spoke of you often." He draped his own expensive suit jacket over my shoulders, covering the humiliating paper jumpsuit. "Let's go. We have work to do." The next few hours were a whirlwind. We weren't going to a law office. We were going to war. Vance took me to a secure office suite that hummed with quiet, ruthless efficiency. A woman handed me a change of clothes and a steaming mug of tea, while Vance made calls, his words precise and devastating. He wasn't just defending me. He was launching a multi-pronged assault. First, he contacted the board of my family's company. He informed them that the signing, scheduled for that afternoon, was off. He presented them with a document my father had lodged with him years ago, a poison pill clause. It stated that if I were ever deemed medically or legally incapacitated under suspicious circumstances, all my voting shares and board seats would immediately transfer to a blind trust, overseen by Vance himself, pending a full investigation. Mark wasn't getting a single share. The company was firewalled. Next, Vance unleashed his investigators. They were financial archaeologists, and they dug into Mark's life with surgical precision. They found what I was too blind with love to see. Mark was drowning in debt from a series of failed tech startups. He had been siphoning small amounts from my personal accounts for over a year, carefully covering his tracks. The life of luxury he pretended to provide me was funded by my own money. He was a parasite, and the company was his last-ditch effort to secure a host that would feed him for life. The final piece of the puzzle came from Sarge O'Connell. He remembered something from the night before, the name of the pharmacy on the bag Mark had been carrying. Vance's team pulled the security footage. There, clear as day, was Mark buying a box of cosmetic blood capsules an hour before he called the police, the kind actors use to fake injuries. He'd also purchased a small, cheap picture frame, identical to the one he'd smashed on our mantelpiece. Armed with this arsenal, we didn't just walk into the police station, we owned it. Vance had arranged for the district attorney to be present. We laid it all out. The forged psychiatric reports, the financial motive, the premeditated staging of the assault, the corrupt judge. The case against me didn't just crumble, it evaporated. Then Vance presented the evidence against Mark. The DA, a politician who could smell a high-profile case a mile away, immediately issued a warrant for Mark's arrest on charges of fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. They arrested him at our home. I was there, standing on the sidewalk with Vance as they led him out in cuffs. The mask was gone. The charming, concerned husband had been replaced by a snarling, panicked man. When he saw me, his eyes widened with disbelief, then contorted with pure hatred. "Clara, you can't do this. I love you," he screamed, the words sounding hollow and absurd. I just looked at him, feeling nothing but a vast, empty cold where my love for him used to be. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, wrapped in Arthur Vance's jacket, and watched as the police car pulled away, taking my husband, my jailer, to his own cage. Later, Vance handed me a large manila envelope. "Your father left this with me. He said to give it to you if you ever truly needed it." Inside was a letter in my father's familiar scrawl. It spoke of his love for me, his pride, but also his worries. He'd had his suspicions about Mark but didn't want to interfere, hoping he was wrong. The letter ended with a line that made me finally break down in tears, not of sorrow but of gratitude and love. "My darling Kingfisher," he wrote, "I know you have your own wings, but I've made sure there are people who will always clear the storms from your sky. Now fly." Mark lost everything. He took a plea deal that will see him in prison for the next 10 years. The company is mine, stronger than ever. Sarge O'Connell got a quiet promotion and a very generous anonymous gift to his pension fund. As for me, I found a strength I never knew I had. I learned that the worst cages aren't made of steel bars, but of lies and deceit. And I learned that even when you think you're all alone, the love of a good father can reach beyond the grave to set you free.